Blog Talk Radio.
Archangels, ghosts, and Bigfoot, oh my. It's just another night for Supernatural Girls. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only, Supernatural Girls.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girls Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker, and I'm here, yay, with my co-host, Patricia Kirkman. You're back.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be back. I feel like it's been ages since I've been here.
I know, it does. Well, oh my gosh, we're all so happy that you're here. I had so many email messages, text messages asking how you were. Everybody was saying prayers for you to get out of the hospital and back home safe and sound.
Thank you for that. That's greatly appreciated. And evidently it worked. I'm out and I'm home.
Yay, that's great.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And now we've got a brand new month to work on, which is absolutely
fabulous. Tell us
fabulous.
all about it. Yeah, tell us what's happening this month.
Well, it's a month dealing with fresh starts and new beginnings. We're in a year of major change, but this month says let's go for it. You've got opportunity to make super changes right now, and it's going to start making things happen. Look at what you want for the future, because this is a time to get everything in motion. The year that we have is all about luck, as I said, but we're also to allow ourselves to take advantage of it. So for this month, trust your instincts and your intuition. Perfect time to take that extra chance. Be original, be inventive, and you're going to be surprised what your intuition is going to lead you to. So go after what you want. It's going to come. Give it a chance.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, this is a nice positive change.
There's luck to it, so it's really a good way to go. Giving ourselves opportunity for all the good stuff to happen.
Wow. We're ready. We've had enough of
Boy,
the
are
other
we ready.
It's
been a long time go.
That's for sure.
Yeah, don't be afraid to take a flyer on things, because the opportunity for this month lead your own items forward, and it's a year of all kinds of changes. And remember, the 5 has a luck factor to it. So the 5 years there
luck.
And this month is all about new beginnings. So why not take advantage of it?
We're ready. It feels like it's just time to stand in front of the sun and say, thank you, we are ready. Looks good. Well, so glad to have you back, and this is all good news that you're bringing with you.
I've missed our people.
Yeah, I know. Everybody missed you, too. So,
we've got
especially me,
tonight.
Of course.
Better.
Keep me company on the air. It's been so much fun having you here, and wanted to continue forever. So,
well, we'll see what we can do about that with all these great guests that we have.
That's right. And all this new health technology, and we're going to continue to report on new health technology for all of our listeners. We've had some fascinating shows with Dr. Weber from Germany, and also the lady who talked about the blood work, the functional blood analysis. Kristen Grace McGarry was with us. And wasn't that great?
Yes, it was. Brought out things that I didn't even think about.
I know. There's so many other opportunities to take a look at your health to give you better information than what we traditionally know. And also, people have been emailing me about the laser watch invented by Dr. Weber. And what I was able to do was to get a discount for our listeners. And it is a pricey piece of technology. It works, however, I can tell you that. and it is German-made. So this is not a made-in-China thing, and that's why it costs a little more than what we would all like to pay, but it's well worth it. But I can get anybody a discount who wants to purchase it, or the virus attachments that can be purchased separately. So if anybody's interested, just shoot me an email. I will do my best to get you that discount, and you can have it within a few days. So we're going to be doing more of these kinds of shows so that you can stay on top of any health issues that you may have, and we're going to just keep working away at it to give you the best of the best, as we always do. So instead of doing the Grabavoy numbers tonight, I wanted to tell everybody about something else that's very similar, and it's called switch words. Now, switch words, there's a book by James T. Mangan, and he invented this concept. It's very, very similar to the Grabavoy numbers, but it basically does something very much the same. It switches your subconscious negativity so that you can focus more on what you want and create it. Now, the switch words may sound like they don't make any sense, but that's part of how it works. So I'm going to give you a couple of phrases tonight instead of numbers, and you can use these to interrupt your negative thinking and to bring it back around to focus on what you want. So the first one is simple. It's golden sunrise. That's actually a switch word phrase, golden sunrise. Then another one is wolf magic, begin now. And that one you can use whenever you want a quick solution to any issue, whether it's money, your job, your family. Wolf magic, begin now. And like I said, these phrases don't make really a lot of sense in our logical mind, but that's the reason you use them, is to switch, use it as a switch, to basically change your thinking, focus on what you want, open the doorway so that, as you said, PK, you can get what you want this month. So here are two switch word phrases to use, golden sunrise and wolf magic, begin now. And I'll be giving you more of those in the coming weeks, so always at the beginning of the show, so don't miss it. So tonight, we have a great guest.
Yes,
do we not,
do.
PK? We do.
Yes, for sure.
And
excited
he's calling
to hear
in.
Hey.
Yeah, he's calling in all the way from a very magical island called Malta. And his name is Warren Agius. I think I pronounced that correctly. And he is a UFO investigator. He's written a terrific book. It is called Evidence of Extraterrestrials. Over 40 cases prove aliens have visited Earth. So, again, Warren is a longtime UFO researcher. He is known for his unbiased approach to factual evidence. He has personally interviewed UFO contactees, as well as best-selling author, a friend of ours, Whitley Streiber, and the late UFOlogist Stanton Friedman. So, Warren's with us tonight, and Warren, welcome to the show.
Thank you both for having me. It's an honor. It's an honor being here.
Oh, thank you. We're honored that you're here with us, and what a book you have written. This is, as we were all talking before we came on live on the air, very well done, very meticulously investigated and researched. This is a book, anybody who has a UFO library, you need this book, because it catalogs and reports on cases. I didn't even know about these cases. Some of them you didn't know about either, right, PK?
Oh, heavens, I was so surprised at some of them. I'm sitting, my jaw drops. I'm going, oh, my God.
Yeah.
That means so much.
Fabulous.
Yes. So we are going to be discussing these. You're welcome, and thank you for writing it, because we're going to be discussing all of these cases, as many as we can discuss tonight. But again, you're going to have to get the book to get all the details of these cases, but each and every one of them is compelling. So, Warren, let's start with you personally. How did you get involved with UFO research?
With UFO research, I started after reading a couple of books. I first read books by Jim Marrs and then Timothy Good, both of whom are excellent authors in the field, naturally. But then I also wanted to write something myself. I realized that I wanted a book that basically detailed all of the UFO sightings, which prove that basically aliens exist and they have been visiting Earth. But I couldn't find quite the book that I wanted to find. So I said I'll just write it myself, basically. But I did so by using factual evidence, for example, declassified documents and witness reports. So all the information that you find on the book, it's completely factual in nature, and it all comes from documents which have been declassified by the Air Force. So that's important to keep in mind.
Yes. And you start way back in our history here with a number of cases, but one of them that really, really struck both of us was the Battle of Los Angeles. So can we start there? Tell us about this Battle of Los Angeles. This is amazing.
Yeah, indeed. And the Battle of LA was probably one of the first sightings which made me so interested in the phenomenon, because it's genuinely something you would see in a sci-fi movie. That's how interesting it is, basically. So what happened is it goes back to 1942. And it was just 3 months after the Pearl Harbor attack, so everyone was a bit anxious. But with that being said, there were constant air raid drills and sirens to prepare the public, just in case another attack would happen. But it was in the late February, I believe it was around February the 25th, when at around 3 a.m. the air raid sirens went off, and everyone just assumed this was another drill, but that was not to be the case. What happened was that when people exited their house, thousands of people just saw this disc-shaped object hovering silently in the sky. There was an enormous disc-shaped object, but surrounding it were smaller ones, smaller aircrafts. And what's interesting to note, and perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this event, is that for an entire hour, the Air Force and the military just shot anti-aircraft shells at the aircrafts, but to no avail, because they were completely unaffected by it. And the anti-aircraft shells are designed specifically to shoot down an aircraft, but it seemed as though that these UFOs were protected by some sort of force field. And not to stray away too much from the event, but nowadays we know that force fields are something within the realms of possibility, especially if the aircraft possesses anti-gravity technology. So it perfectly makes sense. But going back to the event, after an hour of the Air Force trying to shoot down these UFOs, nothing practically happened until they basically disappeared out of sight. And what's interesting about this case is that there were thousands of eyewitnesses, literally thousands. And at some point, what's also interesting is that there were no Air Force fighter jets. There were no Air Force jets which were scrambled, which is certainly odd. Because naturally, if an aircraft infiltrates national airspace, it is the Air Force's responsibility to protect the nation. But that was not to be the case on that night. It was the nation was left completely defenseless.
That's incredible. And here were thousands of people watching this. Did anybody provide an explanation or an attempt at one? We love to hear these ridiculous explanations that the military throws out there, thinking that we're all so stupid. What was their explanation on this one?
Yeah, so they provided a number of explanations. The first one being that it was a weather balloon, because that's the first explanation that the Air Force provides. But it was immediately debunked, because if there's a weather balloon and you spend an entire hour just shooting anti-aircraft shells at it, it's naturally going to be shot down. But they quickly changed that statement and stated that the UFOs were Japanese aircraft sent to induce psychological terror, basically. But once again, that doesn't make sense either, because first of all, the Air Force would have known where the aircraft originated from, and apart from that, once again, if you're spending an entire hour just shooting anti-aircraft shells at an aircraft, it's practically going to get shot down. And
right.
Obviously, the shapes do not correlate to one another. As far as I know, there is no aircraft, especially back in 1942, which resembled a disc shape, let alone a disc-shaped object which performed erratic maneuvers, zigzagging from one side to the other. So that was the last explanation which they provided, that it was an aircraft, a Japanese aircraft sent to produce this psychological terror, essentially. But that doesn't mean that that's the actual explanation, obviously.
Well, yeah. And now when you were researching this case, you probably asked for a number of documents through a FOIA request. And were there any documents that you got on this that were heavily redacted? But so it gives the impression that, yes, they had more information, they just weren't going to tell us about it?
Yeah, essentially, if you request a document from the Freedom of Information Act, you can assume that 3/4 of it will be completely blacked out. And the information which you're left with, don't get me wrong, it's still significant because there's quite a lot of information which, if you dig deeply into it, you'll find that there's a lot of substance to it. But to answer your question, yes, most of the documents I had to go through are completely blacked out. And perhaps I understand where the Air Force is coming from, because we don't know anything about these aircraft. So, but it's certainly frustrating, definitely.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because I know you worked very hard to get all the information that you could from these documents, and of course, when they're blacked out that way, it makes it a little challenging. So
it certainly does. It certainly does.
So this is something that happened. Thousands of witnesses. Were you able to find any of these witnesses that are still alive? Were you able to talk to anybody that was there?
I myself have not. But for example, Jim Mars, he in his book he includes a number of eyewitness reports, and not just Jim Mars, but a lot of people. For example, there's an eyewitness. The first one who comes to mind is Peter Jenkins, and he worked for the Los Angeles Examiner, which is a publication.
Right.
And he saw it. He saw it himself, and he described the incident in which he stated the same thing that we're talking about, that there were over 20 UFOs hovering silently in a V-shaped formation, and they just disappeared. And there are a number of eyewitness reports which corroborate with one another. Interestingly enough, which is certainly unfortunate, is that a man lost his life as well on this night because of the amount of shells which were shot, and he lost his life because of a heart failure from all the noise that was produced by the ammunition being fired, which is it's very unfortunate, obviously.
So he was a civilian on the ground when this happened?
Yeah, exactly. And there was so much chaos that he lost his life due to heart failure.
What a shame. And still no real answers from the Air Force.
Yeah, but that's interesting, and you're certainly right. But I always tell people that just because a document says something doesn't mean that that's the actual truth. Because if we go over all of these cases, and other cases which I have not included in the book, but there's so much information that you can come to a conclusion yourself, because it's genuinely that obvious that the solution, or rather the explanation that exists, it's the explanation that the Air Force will not provide.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we have talked a lot about disclosure, the possibility of it. Why are they keeping this from us? It's a big discussion that we've had over and over again on the show about this topic, and it is frustrating for those of us who know the truth, like you do. And it's time to come out with it and stop presenting these foolish explanations that we know just don't bear any truth to them at all. Looks like we have a question from a listener, Warren, so let me see if I can get this person on the air, find out what their question is for you.
Yeah.
Hi, you're live on the air. Do you have a question for Warren? Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Do you have a question for Warren tonight?
No, I have something to say to both of you.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
We love you.
Oh, you are
That's
so
nice.
sweet.
We love you.
Thank you so
No, we
much.
love you.
Oh.
But we really do love you. And I say that to say this right here, is that what you're watching and what you're seeing is real. But my name is Yashima.
Well, it's nice to meet you, and thank you so much for your very kind words. That's very sweet of you to call in and share that with us. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And can I say something else before you cut me off?
Yeah, go ahead.
We don't come to do no harm to nobody. From
Good.
the Galaxy of the Confederation of the Galaxies, I say to you that we do not come to harm anyone. Even when your governments were testing missiles you would see flown by them, and those missiles would be destroyed or taken out of atmospheric pressure. Man would destroy themselves, but we would never destroy you. We're only here to love you and show you as a guide the next steps that you must take as a civilization to become greater civilized than that which you are. But this hate that you have one for one another against religion, color, culture, race, is only causing you wars and destruction. So we don't come to harm no one, but we come to get you on a plane of universal with those that are already here in one unity as creatures that also have to been created by life itself.
Oh, well, thank you. That is absolutely beautiful, and we appreciate it. What a wonderful message of love and light, and thank you so much for calling in. I appreciate it.
Peace be unto you, blessings and love.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
As above, so below.
Okay. Well, that was a nice message, right, PK?
Definitely. Very interesting.
We like to hear about love and light and unity. We're all for it, and it's wonderful to hear that from one of our listeners. That's great. And, you know, we do agree. There's been, Warren, a lot of talk in this country about our government possibly waging a fake alien invasion. This was predicted by Wernher von Braun many years ago, and now we're hearing it from other people that if this government doesn't succeed in making us bend unto a new world order, that they're going to pull out this last card. We all hope it's wrong. It's that it doesn't happen. But we've heard it over and over again. It's quite concerning. But hearing this gentleman reminded me of how we've talked about it in the past, and that we don't believe for a second that aliens would come here to do harm to us on a global scale. I mean, certainly there's been abductees that have been harmed, and there have been people, as you wrote about in your book, Warren, that were killed chasing a UFO. But what we're talking about is a little different. It's on a much larger scale, and we don't believe that it would ever come from real extraterrestrials or even interdimensionals. So, anyways, we're going to definitely continue this discussion throughout our shows on UFOs because it's important to note this. So, anyways, Warren, let's get back to you. Let's get back to your amazing cases. Where do you want to go next? You've got so many great cases here.
Yeah, I think a good topic to move on to, I feel like it's very appropriate, is the number of UFO cases which are related to missiles. Because I know that the gentleman, he mentioned missiles.
He did, yes.
I think it's appropriate to cover the topic a little bit and the correlation between UFO sightings and nuclear missiles. Because there have been a lot. There is certainly that link between sightings happening over nuclear missile sites. For instance, there was a case in which I believe over 50 missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, were completely disabled after a UFO sighting. So what happened was that in October of 2010, there was an unidentified object, a disc-shaped object, spotted over a nuclear site. And shortly after, 50 missiles, which basically account to 1/9 of the missiles owned by the U.S., they were completely, they had completely shut down. Well, not shut down, but they went to a left down status, it's called, in which that the missile is completely operational, but only from airborne. So what that meant is that basically the Air Force no longer has control over the missiles, even though they're completely operational, which is very worrying.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting to note. And many people have been asking, why are aliens so interested in our missiles? And my answer to that question would be is that when we look at missiles and how humans basically self-destroy the planet, we self-destroy ourselves essentially, it affects other planets and other galaxies. It's not just a terrestrial problem, but it also becomes an extraterrestrial problem. So is the interference happening to avoid another basically disaster like there was in Hiroshima? Or is it simply a coincidence? But I don't believe that it's a coincidence because there's been so many cases. So that's an interesting point, in my opinion.
It's a very interesting point, and actually we had one of the military people on the show talking about it. He was there when it happened, and there were witnesses of these UFOs in the sky before all of these missiles were shut down, and it was a definite show of force on their part that they weren't going to let these things launch. Not that there were any plans to that I'm aware of, but that was quite an experience for everybody on that base. So
Definitely.
yes, I agree that they're keeping watch, more or less.
Yeah, and it's also like a wake-up call as well. It's a wake-up call in the sense that although we create we have this arsenal to basically destroy other countries, well, we don't really have control over it at the end of the day. We do, but to an extent. But in this case, proves otherwise, right?
Yes, it does. That's
Definitely.
a very valuable case, yes. It didn't just happen once, right? It happened more than once.
It happened on numerous occasions. In fact, there was a conference in 2010, in the same year, in which there were 7 Air Force personnel. They held a press conference, and it was aired on CNN, and it was called the Disclosure Conference. And in this conference, the 7 gentlemen, they all described their experience of how they saw a UFO over nuclear missile sites. And they're all very similar in the sense that they all notice a disc-shaped object or a bright object hovering over the nuclear missile site, and then shortly after there would be something odd happening, such as the missiles going into a no-go condition, or the missiles failing to launch, or they lose communication with the missiles. And this is a common theme in all of these witness statements.
That's, yeah, it really does say a lot what they're capable of and what they're not going to allow us to do. Yeah. Now, PK, you lived on military bases. You must have seen some things in the sky when you were living there, right?
Well, it was kind of strange because we came to areas that did not necessarily have a airfield. We were in other areas until we were overseas. There were a few things that were a little strange when we were there, but you never can pin anything down because you're almost at the stage at that time. You're almost afraid to say anything because people just looked at you a little strangely.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know how to accept what you had to say, and they still do today. Let's face it; that's never going to change.
Yeah. I think it's less than it was years ago. You're right, but yeah, back then you didn't dare talk about it.
Oh heavens, no, not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, we all know the military has a depth of knowledge about it. We don't know how much they know, and we've been told that they know some things, but they don't know everything.
I mean, and I think it's in a sense, and I always use this comparison, right? That if we grab a Tesla and then we go back in time and we give it to a caveman and we ask him to figure out how it works, will he know how to drive a Tesla? No, he will not, because the technology is just so advanced. And this is the same concept, that we're given this technology, which doesn't make a shred of sense, in the sense that when we look at an anti-gravity propulsion system, we practically know nothing about it. Or if we do know something about it, we certainly cannot operate it, because this technology defies the laws of physics, the laws of aerodynamics, and it cannot be operated.
Yeah. I think back to when I was a kid. I used to help my dad work on the car, and there was just a few parts, and I even knew how to make things happen under the hood. Today, it's a whole new world. Couldn't even tell you what's what underneath the hood anymore. Things have changed so much.
Yes, and some of the ships that we've heard people talk about on the show, they've said that it's like they're alive. So there's so much more to the technology of these ships. It's a living organism. Some of them are, according to
like
witnesses.
a consciousness, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that characteristic is also common in these UFO sightings, in the sense that the UFO or whoever is piloting it, they seem to possess spatial awareness. And what I mean by that is that they are aware of the fighter jet's position in space and time. For instance, if a military fighter jet is scrambled, the UFO would maneuver in relation to it, which naturally means that there is this consciousness obviously in it.
Right. That is so beyond our normal way of thinking that I would imagine it's hard. You can't reverse engineer something like that without really changing your whole consciousness. That's amazing. Amazing. So tell us about Belgium, because there was a UFO wave over Belgium. We'd like to hear about other countries experiencing this as well. So tell us that one.
Mm-hmm. So the Belgian wave, it's known for the Black Triangle wave. So when we look at UFO sightings, there's obviously the disc-shaped UFOs, the cigar-shaped UFOs, but there's also the Black Triangle, which seems to be, which in Belgium it was basically a very common sighting. And in 1989 there was a wave in which many Belgians, they saw this black triangular shaped aircraft, and it had this bright white light and a red pulsating glow in its center. And this massive aircraft would just hover silently at an extremely low altitude as well. But these sightings, they did not come from ordinary people who may create a story just for a hoax. In contrary to that, these sightings came from lieutenants. For instance, there's this one lieutenant, and in the late months of 1989, he was driving with his wife, and to his side, as he was driving, to his right side, I believe, he saw this big black triangular-shaped aircraft hovering silently. And as he followed it, they drove next to an opening where he could get a better view of it. And this aircraft, it just started rotating on its axis, very similar to the gimbal UFO footage, which was recently released. And maybe we can talk a bit about that later. But it just rotated on its axis, and it moved in relation to his position, to the lieutenant's position. So the white glow, it started facing the lieutenant's car. So it went belly up, essentially. And from there on, it just shot up to the sky and disappeared. And he stated that no aircraft that he saw in the Air Force could maneuver in that way, especially when we consider the acceleration that it performed, and completely silently. It's impossible, and there's no way it could have been man-made. When we look at the ability for this aircraft to perform, to maneuver at such a velocity without essentially producing any noise, it's impossible. It's impossible for it to have been man-made. And this sighting, essentially, it became a common sighting. It happened in 1989, and in the following year, in 1990, many other lieutenants kept making these sightings, and all of them were very similar in nature, in which there's this triangular UFO. It's black in color. It carries out erratic maneuvers until it just disappears out of sight. At some point, an F-16 fighter jet was also scrambled, but to no avail, naturally. And it was also spotted on the air traffic control radars. So this sighting is not only a visual sighting, but it's also a radar sighting, which makes it more credible.
Yes.
And the investigation, once again, it's very interesting because there's a difference in which the Belgian Air Force, in which they handled the case. Instead of trying to disprove it, they simply stated that there were no military exercises happening at the time, which rules out the idea that it was a military aircraft. And they also stated that it wasn't a commercial aircraft. And apart from that, which makes this investigation even more interesting, is that the lieutenant and the Air Force commander, he confirmed with other countries such as the United Kingdom and the United States, and he asked them if there were any aircrafts which belonged to them, if there were any aircrafts in the airspace, and they naturally denied that. So this case is still unsolved. Well, not really unsolved. We have an idea of the origin, but we don't know obviously any details about it. So what's interesting is that the Belgian Air Force, the approach is very different. They did not go on the defense immediately, and they didn't try to debunk or ridicule the sighting. Conversely, they just stated the facts, and the facts is that it wasn't military, and that's all they could have said, and that's certainly applauding.
We've heard from several sources that the black triangle ships are ours, that those are the ones we have in the United States reverse engineered, and there's certain days that they send them up for testing. So we've heard that before with these triangle ships. those belong to us. Whether they are or not, we won't know until they admit it. But we've heard that one. So even with this incredible velocity and the agility of these aircraft that we don't think we could do, there are some we've heard that have been reverse engineered. So we'll wait and see. Maybe we'll find that one out eventually.
And that would be a good thing, because I always say this: listen, if these UFOs turn out to be man-made, then that's great. That's because it makes so many possibilities, such as interstellar travel. That becomes a possibility. So the goal of this, the idea I had in my mind is not to prove that these UFOs are alien. Well, of course, it does prove that naturally. But at all times, if these UFOs are proven to be man-made, then that's great. That's terrific. That means that they're no longer considered unidentified. So that's a good point that you made. That's a good point that you made.
Information, if they would come forward with it, would be helpful, because we know there's many different varieties here. There are the extraterrestrials, there are the interdimensionals, and then there's the ships that we've gotten a hold of that we've reverse engineered and haven't told anybody about. So there's all kinds of things flying around in our skies. We just don't know what's what. So
Exactly. And just like, there are a bunch of cars, a bunch of vehicles, it's the same concept, essentially. It's just infinitely more advanced.
Exactly. Well, it looks like we have another question for you, Warren. Let me just see who this is. And hi, hello. Let's see. Get him on the air. Hi, you're live on the air. Do you have a question for Warren?
Yes, I do, Patricia. This is Hugh. Fantastic information. And prayer is very powerful, and it was just proven with Patricia. Thank God she's healthy again, and hopefully she'll be with you for many years to come. But I wanted to say this and bring another country into play. A while ago, I got a call from Paul Hellyer, who was the Canadian Defense Minister, who's been putting out information for years. Now, I hope people will pray for him, because he's in a difficult health situation right now, but I hope you can follow up. Maybe there's some way he could come on, or have somebody else come on, but he really should be researched. I personally had the UFO encounter with the Black Triangular ship, the Hudson Valley sightings. I don't have the psychic recording that I spoke with, but I asked her, and she said it was a real UFO from what she was picking up on the resonance in my voice. And the previous caller, I want to really give a compliment to, because I do think that we all incarnate to learn love, and as we learn it, it raises the consciousness, and when we go back into the spirit, I do say we're fully accountable, and if we do reincarnate, it's just to keep learning the lessons of love. And also, I also wanted to say that I have so much on that big website. I think you're aware of it. And if you just look that over, I want to thank you also, before I forget, for posting, maybe your guest can comment on it if he's aware of it, the upcoming conference in June by the Catholic scientists discussing non-human intelligence. And I did speak with Dr. Stephen Barr and had him looking at the website. He said, well, that's not really what we're talking about. So I've had UFO, paranormal, and near-death. That's everything that the title of the conference is all about. So I don't know what you're going to be talking about. Maybe it's just some new kind of propaganda. But all that ties in very interesting to what you're saying on the show today. And I did speak with Stanton Friedman a number of months before he passed. That's on the big website. I think it's on the page, media review at the bottom of the page.
Well, thank you, Hugh. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. And we would love to talk to Mr. Hellyer or any of his associates that would like to speak about what he knows. That would be great. But we'll be back in touch. But thank you so much.
One last thing, too. I just wanted to see if he ever researched this gentleman, because I actually spoke with him, too. His name is Frank Chill, Chill.
Frank's been on
yes,
the show.
And this is what I want to interject, and it ties in with the upcoming Catholic Scientists Conference. He said Valiant Thor, when he was asked a question about not having fingerprints, Valiant Thor's response was that their race didn't walk away from God. That was fascinating to me.
Ooh, yes. Yes.
Definitely.
Yep, that was a good one.
So thank you so much. Again, I'll let you get back.
Thank you,
Good
Hugh.
night.
Appreciate it.
Mm.
Yeah, take care. So, Warren, you're a very popular guest. Everybody wants to talk to you. So tell us about this UFO that shut down the Chinese airport.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is one of the sightings which not many people know of, and they should know of it. And it's very interesting because in 2010, this UFO literally shut down a Chinese airport for a long time. I believe it was around an hour, and that cost them thousands, obviously. So what happened was that it was summertime, and it was in Hangzhou, China. I apologize if I mispronounced that. But there was this aircraft, and it was about to land. And as it was doing so, the pilot noticed a disc-shaped aircraft. Or more precisely, he noticed strange lights. And to corroborate his sightings, the air traffic controllers, they started picking up targets, unidentified targets. And although the UFOs disappeared immediately, the airport was shut down for an entire hour, because that's how serious the UFO phenomenon is. And this is a great example of the approach that should be applied, in the sense that if there is an identified aircraft hovering over one of the busiest airports in the world, it's the rational thing to do to obviously shut it down. But this case, I always mention it to people when they say it's just the UFO phenomenon is just about strange lights. Well, no, it is not, because there's a threat to national security, and this is a perfect example of that. So yes, this is a case in which a UFO was sighted over one of the busiest airports in the world, and as a result of that, the entire airport was shut down for an entire hour. So all of the flights were diverted, most of them were postponed. So that's a very interesting case.
It is. And
was
so
there
there must have been... Go ahead, PK.
I was going to ask, was there information given to the population of what it was that created the shutdown? Did they say it was a UFO?
Well, they did not come with a statement per se, but the Civil Aviation Administration, they conducted an investigation, and from the limited information which was released, they stated that it could have been military. Keyword is could have been, but that doesn't make sense, because first of all, why would a military aircraft just hover above one of the busiest airports in the world? And right. Even if it is, and even if a military aircraft is going to hover above an airport, it has to be granted permission to do so. It certainly would not have done that without authorization. It cost them thousands, if not millions. And even if a military aircraft is going to fly over an airport, the air traffic control operators need to be informed, obviously. So that was their explanation, but it certainly does not seem logical for an airport to be shut down for an entire hour unless it's necessary and unless there's a real threat.
Well, you wonder about the fact that it would create a fear or a panic with those in the tower that watch the planes coming and going. How
Exactly.
did they respond with such a situation?
It was a lot of frustration, because when you're exposed to this, if I personally put myself in the operator's shoes, it's terrifying. It's certainly terrifying seeing. seeing bright objects hovering so close to commercial aircrafts, and then having this absurd explanation that doesn't make a shred of sense. It's certainly frustrating. But 2010 was a very interesting year for UFOs in China because in summer, just 1 week before the sightings, there were many more UFO sightings. And some of these sightings were made by pilots, commercial pilots. So once again, these are credible sources we're having here. Yes,
that's so important. And again, so many witnesses, and you're talking about an airport being shut down. You brought up a really important point, which is the cost. When you have to divert flights, when you have to shut down an airport for any amount of time, you're talking about a huge loss of money. So that's a very important thing you brought up, Warren.
Yeah.
So we've had some pilots disappear when they have been chasing a UFO. Tell us about some of those cases.
Okay, so I think we should start from the death of Thomas Mantell. It's extremely unfortunate, but in 1948, so we're talking a year after the Roswell case, so people were a bit more aware of UFOs. Basically, Thomas Mantell, he was a young pilot. He was a competent pilot. He was a Second World War veteran. He was awarded several medals for his service, and he had like over 2,000 flying hours of experience. But what happened is that over Kentucky, the Air Force Base, at Godman Air Force Base, they started picking up an identified target, an unidentified aircraft. And once they confirmed that it wasn't a military aircraft, Thomas Mantell, he was scrambled. He scrambled the fighter jet, and he was on board an F-51. And Thomas Mantell was ordered to identify the aircraft and then intercept. But naturally, that was not to be the case. So what happened was that Mantell, he had two other aircrafts, but shortly into the pursuit, they realized that this was not going to be any use, because the aircraft, it was just too. It was an anomaly essentially. It was flying too fast. It was carrying out erratic maneuvers, and at one point, the aircraft kept going up and down in altitude. So we're talking at 15,000 feet, then dropping back to 10,000 feet. And all pilots, they were running low on fuel and oxygen. But what happened was that the aircraft, the UFO, it climbed at around 21,000 feet, and Mantell was the only pilot who continued the pursuit. And the last thing that he told the air traffic control operators was that he stated verbatim, "It's above me, and I'm gaining on it. I'm going to 20,000 feet." And that was the last words that he said, the last words that we know of. And from there on, that was the last time anyone had heard from him or seen him. And a few hours after the sighting, the event, his fighter jet was found, and Mantell was found in it, obviously dead. So this is one of the cases in which a competent pilot lost his life because he was chasing a UFO. And what made me so angry about this is that the Air Force stated that it was a Skyhawk weather balloon. So essentially they're stating that a competent pilot lost his life because he was chasing a weather balloon. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But
it's disrespectful to the pilot. It's disrespectful to his training. You know, PK, it's terrible. This is terrible because this is a shadow over his memory of, who he was as a pilot, as a person, that he was some idiot just flying around like a nut, And I think, wasn't there also something said about he was chasing Venus?
Yeah, and in fact, that was the other explanation that they provided was that it was a Venus. It was Venus, the planet. But once again, that doesn't make sense because at the time of the sighting, the position of Venus. So the time of the sighting was at around at 3 o'clock, I believe. It was early afternoon, and Venus would have been located somewhere in the southwest, but that was not the position that Mantell was flying at. It was in the complete different direction. And also, as far as I know, planets are completely stationary. I have never heard a case in which a planet performed erratic maneuvers or carried out steep vertical climbs. So there's that inconsistency. The Air Force stated that it was Venus and then went on to say that it's a weather balloon. But these two explanations, they do not suffice because they don't make sense. And apart from that, when we're talking about the early afternoons, Venus would not have been bright enough for Mantell to locate it and even chase it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good point.
It's wonderful, wonderfully made, and it's so disrespectful to this man. They owe him an apology for that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Jeez, terrible. Now, we have another question. Let me see who this person is, and then we want to hear about the other pilots who disappeared. So
yes.
Let's see. Area code, what do we have here? This is area code 605. You're live on the air. Do you have a question for Warren?
Yeah, I'm here because I saw the headline, Evidence of Extraterrestrials. That's the topic of the show, right?
Yes, we're discussing cases.
Okay. So I'm not interested in UFOs. A lot of people have seen UFOs. I don't doubt that UFOs exist, regardless of whether they're aliens or not. But when you have the headline, Evidence of Extraterrestrials, that means evidence of sentient beings. So are there any artifacts, tape recordings, or video, to make it a very short question, of these types of evidence?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question, and that's a certainly valid question, because when the book is called Evidence of Extraterrestrials, which means that there must be something in it that proves that these beings are extraterrestrial. I completely agree on that. And that's exactly what there is in this book, for the simple reason that if we look at the technology, and it just couldn't have been man-made, and even if it was man-made, no human being can operate it. For instance, if we look at the Tic Tac UFO encounter, the object literally dropped from 28,000 feet to sea level in just 1 second. Now, can any human carry out that maneuver? No, they cannot, because they will turn into paste. Can any aircraft maneuver without an exhaust, an exhume plume? No, it cannot. And these are all indicative that these aircrafts are extraterrestrial in origin, and that is something that I was mindful of. Are these cases simply UFOs in which the object isn't identified, or is it an IFO, which means an interplanetary flying object? And it's certainly the latter, because these objects, they just couldn't have been manufactured on Earth, and they could not have been maneuvered or piloted by human beings. So the evidence is certainly there that these sightings prove that UFOs are sometimes, more often than not, extraterrestrial in origin.
Well, I would say that the sightings would show that the sightings exist, regardless of whether the people who have sighted it, who have actually seen it through their naked eyes or through telescopes, that maybe they have seen what they think they've seen, maybe they didn't see what they thought they saw, and even if they did see what they thought that they had seen, it doesn't mean that it's flown by an alien. It could be flown by remote control, could be secret spare aircraft by the Russians, us, China. Still, again, my question is, of aliens themselves, of sentient beings. What you've done is connect the dots, which is good, but I want to go beyond connecting the dots. I want the artifacts, the videos, the tapes, somebody tapping me on the shoulder. That kind of direct evidence.
And, some of the things you might want to look into would be Bob Bigelow. You know who Bob Bigelow is. He runs the Aerospace Corporation out in Nevada.
No.
Okay. Look up Bob Bigelow. You'll find some things there. But besides this, the Tic Tac encounter is on video and it's on radar. So there are things that actually
if I may
show...
add a point, sorry for interrupting, but if I may add a point, is that when we look at the word extraterrestrial, it means that it's something that is out of this world. It's something that is originating from outside this world. And could it have been, for example, remotely controlled by the Russians? The dots, they don't connect. And you may ask why. Because this technology, it just doesn't match up with the laws of physics, with the laws of aerodynamics, with the natural laws. So how can a human being perform something that goes against every law that we operate by?
Oh, okay. I'll agree with you that a human being, even if they're in a very sophisticated pressurized suit, may turn into paste at speeds of which you're claiming. But I said remote control. There are planes that we have, commercial airlines, that can be taken over by remote control. There could be military aircraft that could be taken over by remote control. So I'm talking about remote control. I'm not talking about aliens inside a IFO or UFO flying it.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point. Don't get me wrong, and it's a valid question. But that also implies that even if it's remotely controlled, it means that humans are capable of creating an anti-gravity propulsion system. It implies that humans can create vehicles which can perform without an exhaust plume, or vehicles that can perform without flight surfaces such as wings. Or visible propulsion systems, and so far they just do not match up with the laws of aerodynamics, for example. And I always compare it to, once again, the example that I gave beforehand in the beginning of the show, that it's like giving a caveman a Tesla and asking him to figure out how it works, because the technology, the discrepancy that there is just massive.
Okay, so the aerodynamic principles don't apply because we haven't figured them out yet. At least it's assumed that. But is it possible that, for example, our own government will have secret bases in which they're testing out secret aircraft?
And yes, I highly suggest you read about Bob Lazar and S4, which is a couple of 100 miles down Area 51. He stated that they are attempting to reverse engineer flying discs. So is the government in possession of an extraterrestrial aircraft? Yes, but are they able to reverse engineer it? So far, that has not been the case, according to Bob Lazar, who has proven to be credible. And the question is that if the government has reverse engineered it, why wouldn't they use it to their advantage? Because that's definitely something they would do. But it seems as though it's impossible to even comprehend how it operates. Or actually, even if we do understand how it operates, we just cannot replicate it, or we cannot operate it ourselves.
Well, who else besides the government is seeing this flying disc?
Well, you have to be careful with the statements that are made by people. I only mention statements which are backed up by evidence and by paperwork, and Bob Lazar is one of the few people. So I highly, highly suggest that you read up about him. There's also a documentary about him, and there's a lot of paperwork which proves that he's telling the truth. And that's what he says. He says that he was employed to work at S4, which is a base in Area 51, and his job was to reverse engineer UFOs, but they couldn't because it was impossible to do so.
And we've got to move the show along because we've got only about 20 minutes left, and we want to get to some other cases. But I thank you for your call and your very good questions. Very much appreciated.
All righty.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So let's get to these other pilots, Warren. Those, because there were two other pilots you mentioned, and we want to hear about them.
Yeah, so the two pilots are Felix Moncla and Robert Wilson. And this case, it's in 1953, in November, someday in November. And this case happened in Michigan, at Kinross Air Force Base. And once again, there's this event in which an unidentified object showed up on target. And an F-89 Scorpion jet was scrambled, and Felix Moncla and Robert Wilson were the two lieutenants who were piloting the aircraft. And given that these two gentlemen disappeared, the only accounts which we have, they come from the air traffic control operators, obviously. And when they described the event, they stated that on radar they saw that the UFO was maintaining its distance from the fighter jet at all times during the encounter. But at one point, the two blips, they started getting closer and closer to each other until they became one. And naturally, they assumed that they were closing down the distance. But interestingly enough, the two blips, they did not separate into two blips once again. They just disappeared off radar, completely disappeared off radar.
Wow.
So to summarize, what happened is that the two blips on radar, they merged into one, but then instead of separating, they just disappeared. And no one heard anything from them. No one located any wreckage or bodies. No one located oil slicks, which could have indicated that the aircraft crashed into the water. That's it. It was completely a total disappearance. And that's so absurd. And the UFO was traveling so much faster than any fighter jet could travel at that time, at that period in time. We're talking in 1953. And the UFO was traveling at over 500 miles per hour. And that is so much faster than any fighter jet which the U.S. Was in possession of. So once again, these, to go back to the gentleman's question, these are indicative that this was an encounter with an extraterrestrial aircraft. I mean, unless someone can explain it to me, can give me a rational explanation with evidence that these UFOs are man-made and they're operated remotely or otherwise by humans. I'm obviously open ears, but the evidence is there that it just could not have been terrestrial.
Exactly. No, this is beyond our capability as humans, and certainly we agree with what you're stating. And I thought you handled those questions really well, because you're right. I mean, not only could a human being not survive that type of flying,
right?
The speed, everything that those maneuvers, that those things did. The Tic Tac encounter is something that is not an hallucination. That really happened.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
And it's well documented. I mean, and the military did not try to disprove it. They just didn't provide any information on it, except this happened. And this is the biggest problem, is that they have information that they're not willing to share. So we are left with trying to piece things together as best we can. And that's why we're so much in favor of disclosure. It's really important. They keep feeding us these breadcrumbs, but we're seeing more and more sightings. You can't deny them. People have cell phones. They have cameras on these cell phones. They're taking video. They're taking pictures. People have had personal encounters with things that are not of this earth, well documented. Betty Andreasen's case, one of the most highly documented abduction cases, where she had, face-to-face encounters with beings that were not from this planet. So, and Travis Walton, and Carl Higdon. I mean, there's so many people that have had face-to-face encounters with extraterrestrials. So it's impossible at this point to dismiss. And as one of the guests on our show said, you can't say anymore, I believe in UFOs. They are real, period.
Yeah,
so,
it's just as real as it's like stating that you don't believe in
the moon.
Exactly. And many people say, oh, because I haven't seen a UFO myself. Well, have you seen bacteria? Like, have you physically seen a bacterial cell? Have you seen a virus? No, but the science is there to prove that they exist. You can't see an atom, but obviously they exist. And this is the same thing. Just because you can't see, you haven't seen it yourself, there's science to prove that it's there and that it exists.
Exactly. You're right. That's exactly true. Now, one of the countries that has had a multitude of not only UFOs, but all kinds of cryptid reports and things like that is Brazil. And you also talked about the Night of UFOs in your book. And that happened in Brazil, right?
It did in 1986. And I was actually going to mention this case myself because this case is the perfect example of how a UFO report should be handled. But this case is just chaotic because the control tower at the São José airport in Sao Paulo, they started tracking two bright lights just above the runway. So it was a visual sighting. And as a result of these two bright lights, there was a flight which had to be postponed. The landing had to be postponed. So the pilot, he spent an entire hour just flying around the airport in circles until the sighting was over. But interestingly enough, the sighting became even more interesting because the object from two bright lights, they became at least seven objects on radar. So to backtrack a little bit, there was this pilot and he saw two bright lights on the runway, and as a result he couldn't land naturally. So the landing was postponed. But back at the air traffic control, they started noticing 8 targets on the radar. So 8 aircrafts were infiltrating national airspace, and they did not know what these targets were. And that's when 3 fighter jets were scrambled. The first pilot, he made visual contact immediately. Another pilot, he spotted bright lights outside his cockpit window. But my favorite part of this encounter is that on one occasion, as the pilot was trying to break down the distance, to close down the distance, the UFOs would just surround his aircraft. So the encounter shifted from the lieutenant chasing the UFOs to the UFOs chasing the lieutenant. There were and there was 13 targets. Yeah, that must have been so terrifying. And on radar, he just saw 13 unidentified aircraft surrounding his aircraft. And each time he would break off the pursuit, the objects would stop pursuing him. But then each time he started closing down the distance, they would once again surround his aircraft until he broke up the pursuit. And this lasted up until like 4 a.m. until they realized that they were, until they realized that the objects just disappeared out of sight. But the following day, there was a national press conference, and there was the Minister of Aeronautics talking, and he stated that this wasn't military, and it was not a natural phenomenon, like a meteorological phenomenon. And he stated that this was a UFO, and they could not identify what the objects were. Naturally, they didn't say if it's extraterrestrial or not, because they don't know. It's unidentified. But they stated that it was not an optical illusion, it was not a weather phenomenon, and it was not military either. So that leaves, obviously, one last hypothesis. So that's the Brazil case. It's highly interesting, and it's admirable of how the Air Force handled it, because there's a difference, naturally. Instead of debunking the sighting and saying that it's a bright Venus or a weather balloon, instead the Minister of the Aeronautics just stated that We don't know what they are. They existed because they were solid objects on radar, and the lieutenants made visual sightings. But they're not military, and they do not come from another country. All we know is that they existed, but we don't know where they come from, or who they are, or what their intentions were, essentially. And that's terrifying. It's terrifying.
And it was honest. They were so honest about it. And there's
exactly.
a lot to be said about that. That they didn't know what it was, but they were able to dismiss certain things, like it wasn't from the military, it wasn't a meteorological event, and they didn't know what it was. I mean, that's the honesty that we're all looking for.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's just honesty, because they're unidentified. We don't know where they come from, but that's it. They're just unidentified, and that's all it takes to disclose the truth.
Yes, that would be step one, is be honest about it. So, yeah, and again, the South American countries seem to have a very different mentality around UFOs, and certainly the indigenous people do as well. They've had stories passed on from generation to generation and amongst themselves, and these are people that have not been exposed to television and the media crush that we experience here, and yet they tell the same stories. So different culture and a different
about it. There's so much that's the same, yet coming from so many different areas. How can we dispute it?
Right.
Exactly. 100%.
Yep, exactly right. What is your favorite story that you investigated and wrote about in your book?
I think it would have to be the Tic Tac UFO, because, there's just so much evidence. There's footage that comes from a fighter jet, and there's also 5 characteristics in this sighting which proves that the object was extraterrestrial. So the Tic Tac UFO, I'm sure your listeners have heard about it. There's footage on YouTube. Please check it out. It's amazing. But to get to the interesting point immediately, this Tic Tac shaped UFO, in 1 second, it dropped from 28,000 feet to sea level. But what happened was that when it dropped to sea level, the sonar team on board the USS Louisville, who were patrolling just below the surface, they registered that an unidentified object had plunged into the ocean, and it was traveling, it was exceeding 70 knots, which is twice as fast as the Navy's fastest submarine. So here we're looking at a transmedium vehicle where the object can travel in different mediums, such as the atmosphere and the ocean, which is once again impossible for any terrestrial aircraft. And the object was traveling so fast, we're saying it exceeded the speed of sound without producing a sonic boom. It exceeded it exceeded Mach 5, which means that it exceeded the speed of sound by 5 times. And no sonic boom was heard. And if anyone travels in that speed, they will turn instantly into paste. There's no chance anyone can survive that velocity. So that is my favorite case, because there's just so much evidence in it, and it could not have been manufactured on Earth. And when we have the Pentagon saying that this is a genuine UFO case, then that's when you know how serious it is. That's when you know, when you have the most experienced lieutenants like Jim Slate and Commander David Fravor, when they come out and say that they've never seen anything like it and that they cannot comprehend how the aircraft operated, that's when you know that the object is just not terrestrial. And to go back to the question which the gentleman asked, is how do you know that they're extraterrestrial? Well, the answer is very simple. It's obvious that we're not alone in the universe. We never have been. And it would be quite gullible for us to think so. And when we take that into consideration and these sightings into consideration, we can connect the dots, and we can come to a conclusion that these are extraterrestrial in origin. What their intentions are, we don't know. They certainly do not owe us an explanation, obviously, but that's evidence that they're extraterrestrial in origin.
Yeah, I don't see any other explanation that fits. There
Exactly.
isn't one. So, yes, and it's obviously you're right. We're not alone in the universe. It'd be crazy to think that. And it's time that we start looking at all of these cases, and you've done a brilliant job of putting these together in a logical format. And it's, again, this is the name of the book, everybody, which you should have in your UFO library, is Evidence of Extraterrestrials. Over 40 cases prove aliens have visited Earth, by our guest tonight, Warren Agius. And it's just wonderful. I mean, there's so many. We haven't even gotten to not even half of the cases in your book tonight. There's so many, and you cover so many countries. New Zealand is in here. You have President Carter's sighting in here. Now, President Carter's an interesting one, too.
Yeah. To go over is basically President Carter, as he was carrying out a speech in Chicago, the attendees, they started noticing a bright object in the background. And when Carter noticed it himself, he saw that the object was changing its color from black to red to green and then back to white. And it was just hovering silently, just a couple of miles away. And the object disappeared. Now, the sad part of the story is that the investigation was not initiated after a couple of years after the case happened. So the evidence which we do have is not, there isn't much substance to it because most of the description is not detailed. But so it's one of those cases in which you cannot say if it's extraterrestrial or not. But if we compare it to the other sightings, there's that similarity. So we can sort of assume that it is. But it's so interesting to see a president who notices the seriousness of the phenomenon. And before the election, he stated that if I'm elected, I will declassify all of the information. But naturally, he was elected, and he couldn't. He wasn't allowed to disclose information because this goes beyond. Isn't it? Yeah, and this goes beyond the president. And I highly doubt that any president knows the nitty-gritty details about the phenomenon.
Right. I think you're right.
Well, was Eisenhower involved at one time?
Sorry?
Wasn't Eisenhower involved with something one time? I think it was the base in New Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. It was.
Amazing. Everybody gets a chance to get a little piece of the pie, but they won't open the pie.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. You know, we had Larry Holcomb on the show who wrote the book Presidents and UFOs, and he talked about Carter. And he did tell us something that piqued our interest, so we questioned him further. And this was what he said, that Carter did want to declassify things, but he was one of the presidents that actually was briefed. Some presidents were not briefed, like Clinton wasn't briefed.
Yeah.
But Carter was. And they said that after Carter was briefed, he went to his office and was sobbing. So we were asking Larry, we said, well, why was he crying? What did they tell him that upset him to the point where he couldn't stop crying? And he said, that's a good question. I think I got to find an answer to that. But we haven't heard back from him yet on that.
Oh, we haven't. That's for sure.
No, we got to call him up. Because one of the hypotheses we had, since President Carter was very religious, is that whatever they told him disturbed him on a very deep level.
Yeah, and it goes against...
went against his religion and possibly said we are aliens, that we are hybrids. Whatever they told him, he was very shook up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So very interesting, very interesting. What's going to be your next book, Warren?
In my next book, I want to go deeper into possibly abductions. but I'm still working on it. So my goal is to dissect the phenomenon into as little pieces as I can. So in this book, we covered UFO sightings, and in the next one, we could dissect abductions into great detail. And then just book by book, we just, if we compile them together, it would be this big pile of evidence, essentially, which is indisputable, and that proves that aliens exist and they have visited Earth. They always have, whether we like it or not, and they always will. Yes,
well, that sounds fascinating. We'd be happy to share some of the cases we've encountered with you so that you can go ahead and investigate them for your next book. We would
Thank you so
be happy
much.
to share that with you. And
Thank
again,
you.
we haven't even covered, there's so much in here. You even talk about the Nazis in here. The Nazis were very involved with this kind of technology, and that's in the book as well. So, and then you talk about alien bodies. There's, oh my goodness, there's so much in here. Rocket-shaped UFOs land in Levelland, that's in Texas. And you also discuss the Roswell crash, which is quite well known, but this is, again, a compendium of all these experiences that point to a certain reality. You even have pilots off the coast of Ireland talking about this.
Exactly.
This is worldwide. This is global, everybody. This is not just the United States, but it is everywhere. Now, you said you had a few things surface in Malta also, but it was not really investigated or much discussed.
Yeah, there were a couple of UFO sightings, and they were mainly centered, given that Malta is an island. They all happened in the middle of the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea, and one of which they describe a massive disc-shaped object just shooting up from the seabed and then just disappearing. But naturally, given the limitations of this country, there hasn't been that much of an investigation, or if there has been, I haven't stumbled upon it yet. But that's certainly something I will dig deeper into. But I want to reinstate what you said, and that's very important, that this is a global phenomenon. Most of these cases we hear come from the United States, but that doesn't mean that they're only cited in the United States. It just means that the United States has the biggest platform where people can talk freely, but that's not the case in all of the countries. So this is a global phenomenon, and people in every country have witnessed this phenomenon, definitely.
Yeah,
I guess
and
we're
that's made very
clear. Here. We have to tell it all.
Yeah, we get so America-centric here in this country. We forget, that this is going on everywhere. And you're right. We have the biggest mouths here. So we get to discuss it a little differently than you do in Malta.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. Well, this has been so wonderful, Warren. We just so appreciate you taking the time and doing everything you had to do to get here tonight. It was no easy task, but you did it, and
thank you for having
wonderful.
me.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Greatly appreciated. Very, very interesting, and the book is fabulous.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Yes. So again, everybody, the name of the book is Evidence of Extraterrestrials. Over 40 cases prove aliens have visited Earth. And the author, our guest tonight, Warren Agius, all the way from Malta, again, giving us this great information. So, Warren, please keep in touch. As we mentioned, we're happy to share some of the contacts that we have in the field for your next book, and we'd love to have you back when you have your next book ready.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Well, again, it's our pleasure. I know the audience loved this show tonight, right, PK?
Not a doubt in my mind. It's beautiful.
I know.
Well done.
Very well done, Warren. Thank you so much. And next week, everybody, we will be back with another great show. Until then, we will see you on the Blue Highway. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next week for another radio adventure with Supernatural Girls.
Warren, great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You guys are great hosts, and I'm so glad I could make it tonight.
We're thrilled. Really, it was terrific, and you handled all those questions so professionally. You did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, you take care. We'll be back in touch for sure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.